Happy Thursday, gentlemen. I guess the question is, will Jeff join us today, or is he not on speaking terms with Tianan after various things were pushed to Dr. Odd this week?
Yeah, I don't know. I have committed some crimes in the last week. Admitting that on a recorded line is probably not the best idea, but
They were just crimes against OCI.
it's true. And the OCI famously doesn't have any police or any teeth at all.
Or any good legal framework.
Yeah.
It's all maze and must, and the must are even
Shall,
fuzzy.
shall
How you doing
not.
there, Jory?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing very well. Thank you for the stickers.
You're very welcome. I think Alexi was supposed to get his today. They were going all the way to Australia.
Did they print them upside down?
I'd like I'd like to know that.
Jeff, Tiana, and I were 50-50 on whether you would show today or whether you had a grudge against OCI after things he pushed to Dr. Odd this week.
No, everything's great. Everything is wonderful.
I've said it a few times, someone's going to wonder what it is. And I think it's just more fun to just leave it as a mystery. All right. Looks like we got a pretty decent quorum here. I only put a couple things on the agenda, and one of them I only put the last minute here. So hopefully you don't mind, Jeff, but I threw your item on there. Let's see. Pick the right window to share. And there we go. So yeah, the multiple tag push thing. Figure I'll throw that out there just to make sure folks got some visibility on it. And Jeff and I have been going back and forth on whether there should be some limits on there. But otherwise, I think we got something. And I know I put my second comment on the same line that I said change, so it automatically got cleared off of there. But one other comment in here was to include an example somewhere in that of what it looks like when you have multiple tags.
Yeah, I was little it may come as a surprise, maybe. But it seems as though we don't really have a lot of standard ways of writing the spec. Um, I mean, what I mean by that is like there's the pushing refers flow kind of has its like it's like a header for kind of separate section versus just like a optional thing within. Some things have examples, some things don't. So yeah, I absolutely do want to put an example in there. Just need to figure out what the best UX is for that. Also, in sort of keeping with the maybe actually have an implementation of it. I do have this written up against the staging hub environment. As long as that works out well. This should actually be something that Hub supports in the coming days to actually be hey, this is what it looks like in practice, so we can kind of experiment with.
Cool. I was thinking I need to try to get some of my own registries as well. When I was thinking of examples, I was just thinking of along the lines of different places we say, hey, here you go, you do a location and a digest with a request, and then these things. So we've got some of that. Every once in a while I put a vertical bar in there, which throws me all off because that to me is it's a key indicator if there's a different section in there. And that's really not at all the way our spec is done. Like pushing manifest is nowhere near as big as it should be. But yeah, I was just kind of thinking along the lines of we've got the section up top that says in pushing manifest that it needs to go to this URL or this endpoint. And so just to say, hey, you can push that to that endpoint with a bunch of tags on the end, with multiple tags. I wonder, do we need another endpoint or not? Because right now we just have the push to the manifest here. It's still put.
As in,
Well, as in like we got 12A and B
okay.
with like the refers to the digest and the refers digest from the artifact type. I wonder if it makes sense to split 7 up into 7A and B, just like we have 8A and B. Put an extra entry in there that says instead of going just to manifest reference, there can be a put to manifest reference question mark tag equals yada yada tag equals yada yada.
Got it. Yeah, that could make sense, especially if we end up doing some of the additional failure codes that you had mentioned in terms of the status codes for if the request is too large and whatever.
Yeah.
So that could make sense because then the failure modes would be different for the different import.
Although I'm guessing implementations are going to see that if they come out with a 431 or a 414, I'm guessing whether or not a client sees that on this or any other manifest push, they're just going to say, oh, oops, things went bad.
I kind of imagine implementation wise is essentially anything that's non 200, just revert back to sending one at a time would
Yeah.
be my guess.
Either one at a time or 10 at a time. If they try to do 100 at a time or something like that and it threw that error. Cool. Anybody else have questions, thoughts, comments? It was nice and sweet, so I thought this was a pretty good one. The only other thing I threw on the agenda this week was something.
Sorry, I have a
Oh,
question there.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I was in mute. Um, so for multiple tags, the reference itself, can that be a tag when pushing like multiple tags, or does that have to be a digest?
I think I was actually thinking about that a bit this morning. The initially I was thinking more of the reference being a digest. It solves two problems sort of in parallel. One problem being you can actually push multiple tags at the same time. The second use case is it lets you push a tag while actually specifying a non-canonical digest, because right now that is
Right.
not something that the registry API supports. If you push up a digest by tag, you could push a digest or you could push a manifest by digest, and you can push it up as SHA-512 or Blake 3, and then you push up a tag with the same manifest, and the registry will actually, most registries will then hash it according to the canonical digest, because you can't specify which algorithm you want that tag to be associated with. And so that's actually the second use case that you do with this. And so that was kind of the more primary one, was pushing by digest. In
Yeah.
theory, yes, you could also do push by tag with additional tags. I don't know. It's kind of one of those you could implement the same
Mm.
thing more or less for free. I just don't know what the benefit would be other than no reason not to.
Yeah, I like the idea of putting digest as well. But the spec says the reference can be either a tag or a digest. So if we want to make that change, we should probably change the language around the reference or change the signature of the URL.
Or the second endpoint, instead of being a reference, the second syntax for this, instead of that being a reference, it's going to be a specific digest. And so we would just call out that it's a digest only.
Yeah, that works too. Yeah, I like that.
Any other comments on this? I don't want to jump too quick like I did last time. Alrighty. The only other topic I threw on the agenda here was someone that was looking for a way they could push a blob that the registry already had, that the registry didn't know that they necessarily had access to, and so they wanted to do like a proof of ownership of the blob to say, hey, I really do have access to this thing. Can you please do a mount, effectively an anonymous blob mount, but where the registry does a verification and you have access to it. So thought I would raise some visibility here just because it went up into the system and see if anybody had thoughts on that. Y'all are full of thoughts this week. Derek, haven't seen you for a bit. How you been? Go ahead, Cy. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
So, sorry, the second point I'm not too comfortable with. Like the server responds with saying that blob exists. You could, in theory, find blobs which like you shouldn't have access to. So it's exposing some sort of information about a blob without authentication.
So just knowing that the hash is a valid hash is a data leakage for you.
Yeah, a blob of such and such hash exists in the registry without you actually having access to that blob. Yes, in my opinion, like that's leaking information somewhat.
I mean,
Like,
I'd see this as a bit like an anonymous blob mount that we standardize, where it's up to the registry whether they want to support it at all.
I mean, you could envision a world where maybe there's like the registry responds with a temporary salt or something, and then the client rehashes to kind of prove that it does have the contents. But then that requires the registry to then also process it against like a temporary salt, which is highly inefficient. So I think, yeah, some form of like an anonymous blob mount probably makes more sense.
Yeah, I feel like this request is doing what you're saying is they're getting a HMAC of some kind plus whatever that. And so the client has to generate that, with a secret and a timestamp against their actual blob. And then the server is doing the same thing. So I'm kind
That's
of
a
with you, Jeff. I
quick
don't
way
see
to
people.
DDoS a server.
Yeah. Well, the server only has to do the hash if they actually have the blob. The server can just say, hey, here's a hash if you want to try it. Make the client do all the work. That would be
Well, but
rude.
I'm saying the server would have to valid like if you're passing back a temporary HMAC key, the
Yeah.
server would also have to validate that HMAC key against the blob that it's stored. And so every time you do this request, you're asking the server to rehash the contents of of the blobs, which is going to be
Yeah.
very expensive computationally.
Assuming two things. One, the client responds to that hash request, and two, assuming that the server actually has the blob. Because the server could just say, here's a HMAC for you to compute against, and the server doesn't actually have the blob, and it was never going to approve it, but they didn't want to say it. They didn't want to give away they didn't have the content.
Are we introducing proof of work into the Docker spec or the OCI spec?
just annoyance on the client side. Um, but I think your concern, I feel the same concern you do, Jeff, that this is a lot of extra computation, data transfer to the backend S3 or whatever data source that the registry might not want to pay for. So the number of people who would actually want to implement this might not be that many. Sai, did I get your point there on the potential there might be a data leak and theoretical workarounds
Um, what was the workaround? Sorry.
that the server just every
Oh,
digest
okay.
that someone
Yeah.
receives, it just says, here's an HMAC, here's the timestamp and everything, go at it. Whether or not the server actually had the blob.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's it would be incredibly
That
rude
should
to
stop me.
clients.
Yeah. 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 That'll that'll annoy a lot of clients. Yeah. The whole upload path is gonna be a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, like as I said, there's compute considerations as well. Mhm. But
Not just compute. Like I've heard Jeff in the past say that all the communication between the registry server and the backend S3, all that data transfer costs money.
Yeah, I'm on board with the sentiment of the of of the request. Like, yeah, it's good to not upload a blob if you want to save, like transfer fees and whatnot. But
Mhm.
I don't think the approach right now is the correct one.
I mean, isn't this? Yeah, I would say more generically, like the proper way would be more of like an anonymous blob mount, where essentially saying, yes, this digest does exist, and yes, it is public. Therefore, in theory, you would have access to it. So, whatever, don't really care.
Yeah, they seem to be wanting an implementation of anonymous blob mount for blobs that they shouldn't normally have access to.
Yeah, and that's where you get into that's you're leaking a lot of information there, which is probably not safe.
Yeah. This came out about a week ago, and I mentioned they should open up an issue, and they never did. So, not sure if it'll move forward beyond a conversation in the chat, but I like that everybody's thinking the same things I was thinking.
Maybe, I don't know, Tianan has a few weak thoughts around maybe we shouldn't standardize around pushing single multi-gigabyte blobs up and make that the norm. But that ship might have sailed.
Sajay, I see you off mute there. Were you trying to jump in?
Yeah, no, I agree with the general sentiment here. I mean, you have the blob mount. I think we're kind of trying to uh, use hashes as a way to, as a proof of ownership, which might be okay, but you have mount APIs already, and you have authorization already in the picture that everybody implements. So um, I'm not too interested in supporting this API on the Azure side without more justification as to what value does it bring over the existing surface area or the use cases at this point.
I think we're universal unless Rob says that he wants to support it.
I'm not saying any such thing yet.
All right, that's unanimous. Dan, you got called out there for trying to shove too much stuff in one blob. You want to defend yourself?
No, I think large files are stupid. They break things. There's a reason that files are not large, that like the zip standard includes provisions for splitting a large zip file up into multiple smaller files. This is well known to be a bad practice for eons. Not well supported by file systems, not well supported by content distribution systems.
Every time I
Like
hear
I'm being
someone,
gaslit by the whole industry.
every time I hear someone say their workflow broke when they hit like a 2 or 4 gig layer, I'm like, yeah, and
Yeah, like 2 or 4 gigabytes,
Ah,
arguably
yeah.
in a reasonable range, right? Like it's not great, but it at least kind of works. It's when you get tens of gigabytes, hundreds of gigabytes.
Yeah, I
Now
was leaving a
things
comment.
break everywhere.
Yeah, I was leaving a comment in the chat. We have disks in the registry. I mean, honestly, that's like 200 GB. So people have taken it pretty far. Would have been good if we had something guarding in the spec, but it would be nice.
they couldn't split the disk image up into multiple layers.
They could, but nobody ever tells them to. And the API is very open-ended, right? So yeah, you can do many things, but it's like, it's not said anywhere we can do it is kind of the point.
I'm trying to think of what there's a limit. It's either 2 or 4 gigs for something, some integer counter, whatever the precision is on that one. I know it bites some people now and then. It might be that they're pushing their images through MS-DOS, but
Actually, I would say one thing we've run into a bit is there's been a lot of education as well, or knowledge gaps, because I think a lot of the default tooling does not assume that large layers exist. And so, like, while technically the registry spec allows for like chunked uploads, the default behavior in the bulk majority of registry clients does a single stream push. It does not do chunked uploads. And so we've had a lot of internal teams try to push large things and are like, hey, like this is failing. And it's like, well, the client you're using doesn't support the mode that is built for this kind of a thing. And so the client, a lot of the clients aren't necessarily making it easy. Not to say that's the client's fault. This isn't really a use case a lot of people had in mind a couple years ago. So
we can
but
just
then
tell them.
yeah, same thing on the downloads too. Like ranged gets are a thing, but a lot of clients just do a straight single pull. Because yeah, we were getting dinged on the whole. Hey, like, can you guys fix network stability because our 100 GB download times out sometimes? It's like, well, do it in chunks.
We can just tell them that the whole streaming blob push is not part of the OCI standard, and it should be, but it's not, so too bad. One of these days we'll update the spec to include that API. Somewhere in one of our backlogs, I'm not sure whose. Alrighty. Anything else folks want to chat about today? Because that was all I had. Otherwise, I'm going to go back and finish my taxes.
Wow, that's exciting, Brandon.
So thrilling. I mean, the OCI stickers were much more exciting than taxes. Alrighty. Folks, good to see y'all again for another week. We will circle back here again next week, do it all again. And yeah, you got another thanks from Sajay on the stickers too.
Yeah.
Everybody
Anytime you
likes them.
guys want that, I mean, and there's actually some other stuff that I was looking into. There's a a company called Fourth Wall that does more on-demand stuff, and we can do t-shirts and hoodies and things like that a lot more economically than we used to with sort of the warehousing solution. So we can do a lot of things now that were less possible a few years ago.
I haven't been paying attention to the conference schedule. Is there any major events coming up that we should think about whether we want to try to get staffed?
I can send something in Slack, just a short list of what's coming up this spring, summer, if that would be helpful.
I mean, the two I'm thinking of are Open Source Summit and KubeCon.
Yeah, Open Source Summit US is happening in the late spring in Minneapolis, and it's easy enough for us to get like meeting rooms and stuff. So we don't have to make any decisions about that right away. But a booth or something that we could staff might be more interesting, or could be potentially more interesting to us. That's something maybe we can talk about on the TOB too. Meeting.
And Saeed, thanks for pointing that one out. That one might be a good one since we've got Derek on the call. Get my screen share back up again. This one was making the Docker Content Digest non-optional as a header. I think you would even review this before, Derek, and then it just got knocked out.
Previously approved it.
Yeah.
Did anything change?
Little stuff from me.
Okay. Well, I'll reapprove it then. Let's see. I don't see any big changes.
I think some of it was squashing commits and little nits in there, but there was small stuff. All right. There we go. Hopefully we got that knocked out there for you, Saeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me. I forget these things sometimes when they go too long. And with that, I think that's a wrap for the week. We will circle back around here next Thursday. Pick the right day of the week.
Later.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers all.
Thanks, folks.